Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Presta Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastyachadeshitarne Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchikalpatarubhyas cha kripa sindhubhyeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Yes, so devotees, this fourth part of Sri Isopanisad, from mantra 15 to mantra 18, this we call prayers for revelation of the Lord's spiritual form and mercy at the time of death. Yeah, and it's very deep. It's very beautiful. It's very wonderful. The speaker or speakers, the personified Vedas, they're appealing to the Lord for mercy. That we want to, because they're coming from impersonal backgrounds, and they're saying, we want to see your form. At the moment, we're just seeing your dazzling effulgence, the Brahma Jyoti, but we want to see your form. So please let us enter and see your form and meet you personally. Okay, so now we'll do mantra 15, and we'll see, maybe we can do mantra 16 also. So mantra 15. Hiranmayena patrena satyasya pihitam mukam tatvam pushan apavrino satyam dharmaya drishtaye. O my Lord, sustainer of all that lives, your real face is covered by your dazzling effulgence. Kindly remove that covering and exhibit yourself to your pure devotee. Very beautiful. Very, very beautiful. So let's go through the purport. First paragraph. Srila Prabhupada talks about the Brahma Jyoti, which is described in the Bhagavad Gita, particularly in 14:27, which Prabhupada quotes here. Brahmano hi pratishtaham amritasya vyasya cha shashvatasya cha dharmasya sukasya kantakasya cha. I am the basis of the impersonal Brahman, which is immortal, imperishable, and eternal, and is the constitutional position of ultimate happiness. That, at least in Bhagavad Gita, that's the definitive verse, the clearest description, what is the Brahma Jyoti, and what is Brahman realization. So here then, Srila Prabhupada discusses Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. They're three aspects of the absolute truth. Prabhupada says Brahman is the aspect most easily perceived by the beginner. And we see that so many people who are beginners in spiritual life, they have this idea of the light, of energy, some effulgence like that, more than anything. Yeah. So for the beginners, they tend to be most easily attracted by that. Paramatma is realized or appreciated by those who've made some further progress. And Bhagavan realization well, that's the ultimate, all-inclusive feature, total aspect of the absolute truth. So the position of Bhagavan, Sri Krishna, as the highest level, all-inclusive level of the absolute truth, Prabhupada goes on to say that this is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita chapter 7, verse 7. Prabhupada just mentions the first line. Let's just read it here. Mata parataram nanyat kinchadasti dhananjaya mahi sarvamidam protam sutre manigana eva. O conqueror of wealth, there's no truth superior to me. Everything rests upon me as pearls are strung on a thread. Everything rests on Krishna, including Paramatma and Brahman, the Brahma Jyoti. Yes. So Krishna is the source of all these things. And he, in Bhagavad Gita, well, Prabhupada quotes 1042, Krishna explains further, what need is there, Arjuna, for all this detailed knowledge? With a single fragment of myself, I pervade and support this entire universe. So, yes, by a single fragment, that's Paramatma. That's the super soul. So as the super soul, as Paramatma, Krishna is maintaining everything within the material world. And he also is maintaining the spiritual realm. Therefore, he is addressed here in this verse as Pushan in the third line, the sustainer. Krishna is the sustainer of everything. So we go on to the second paragraph, that how the absolute truth, Krishna, is always full of bliss, transcendental bliss, anandamayo vyasat. He's consists of bliss, yes. And so Prabhupada goes into some very interesting discussions here. When Krishna was here 5,000 years ago, he was always in bliss, even in his childhood pastimes, even the beginning. He was killing demons like Aga, Baka, Putana, Pralamba, and as Prabhupada says, these were just pleasure excursions for him. Nothing too demanding. In Vrindavan, of course, he was enjoying with his family and friends. He was stealing butter. Normally stealing, of course, is not appreciated at all. But there everyone was in ecstasy when he was stealing the butter, giving pleasure to his pure devotees. So that's why Krishna does everything in the spiritual world just to give pleasure to his associates. And Prabhupada concludes this second paragraph. The Lord created these pastimes to attract the dry speculators and the acrobats of the so-called Hatha Yoga system who wish to find the absolute truth. So on to the third paragraph, and this is very nice. Prabhupada quotes 10th canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 12, verse 11. It's a very beautiful verse about the cowherd boys, just developing further this idea of Krishna's enjoyment and his pastimes in Vrindavan and how everything is going on in the mood of transcendental ecstasy. So Prabhupada translates the verse that the personality of Godhead, who's perceived as the impersonal blissful Brahman by the Gyanis, who's worshipped as the Supreme Lord by devotees in the mood of servitorship, and who's considered an ordinary human being by mundane people. So Krishna, the personality of Godhead, played with the cowherd boys who had attained their position after accumulating many pious activities. Actually, in the Bhagavatam, there's a somewhat different translation of that verse, just particularly at the end. Let me just read this. It's like the alternative translation of the last bit of this verse. It's from Srimad Bhagavatam. The cowherd boys, having accumulated the results of pious activities for many lives, were able to associate in this way with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. How can one explain their great fortune? It's very beautiful. How can one explain their great fortune? How can we get their fortune like what they got? Sure, because, oh, do we ever need it? Oh, do we ever need it? Krishna. So we go on to the fourth paragraph, just a very short little paragraph, in which Prabhupada explains that the Lord is always engaged in his loving transcendental pastimes with his devotees in the five main types of relationships: Shanta, neutrality; Dasya, servitorship; Sakya, friendship; Vatsalya, parental relationship; and Madhurya, conjugal relationship. Which takes us on to the fifth paragraph. And Prabhupada raises an interesting point, which actually has already been discussed, but he goes into it again. That seeing it said that Krishna never leaves Vrindavan, I think we read that last night. One may ask, how does he manage the affairs of the creation of this universe? Seeing he's way, way out there in Vrindavan, in Goloka Vrindavan. So this is answered, Prabhupada says, in Bhagavad Gita in the 13th chapter, verses 14 to 18. I'm just wondering if I should read let me read these verses. Everywhere are his hands and legs, his eyes, heads, and faces, and he has ears everywhere. In this way, the Supersoul exists, pervading everything. So this is the point. The point is, how does he manage the affairs of the material creation? So, like this is chapter 13, verse 14. The Supersoul exists, pervading everything, with his hands and legs everywhere, his eyes, heads, and faces everywhere, his ears everywhere. The Supersoul is the original source of all senses, yet he is without senses. He is unattached, although he's the maintainer of all living beings. He transcends the modes of nature, and at the same time, he is the master of all the modes of nature. And verse 16, the Supreme Truth exists outside and inside all living beings, the moving and the non-moving. Because he's subtle, he's beyond the power of the material senses to see or to know. Although far, far away, he's also near to all. So this is all exploring this point of how seeing Krishna never leaves Vrindavan. How's he managing this universe? Although the supersoul appears to be divided among all beings, he is never divided. He is situated as one. Although he is the maintainer of every living entity, it's to be understood that he devours and develops all. And finally, verse 18, he is the source of light in all luminous objects. He is beyond the darkness of matter and is unmanifested. He is knowledge. He is the object of knowledge, and he is the goal of knowledge. He is situated in everyone's heart. So this is, as Prabhupada says, this is the answer to that question. How can Krishna be in Vrindavan and never leave? But he's everywhere and controlling everything. So yes, it's as the supersoul. So we move on to paragraph number 6. So yes, the system of God realization is a great science. It's not just do as you like, this some sort of just easy come, easy go type of affair. It's very deep. It's very profound indeed. And many people who have some interest in understanding it, they can't. They just can't, because it's too deep. And their minds are just too much elsewhere. Srila Prabhupada, as an example, talks about the Sankhya people. They analyze and meditate on the 24 ingredients of the creation, but they don't understand the Purusha, the Lord, who is behind the creation, and without whom there can be no creation, and without whom, even when there is a creation, it cannot function. So that's the Sankhya people. They're bewildered in that way. Then there's the impersonalists. They're bewildered by the Brahma Jyoti. So if we really want to realize the absolute truth fully, we have to go beyond, or we have to penetrate through the 24 elements, through the Brahma Jyoti effulgence, to meet the Lord face to face. But he won't let you do it unless he's pleased with you through your service. He only lets the devotees come through to meet him face to face and to associate with him personally. So, yes, Srila Prabhupada concludes the paragraph. Sri Isopanisad points towards this direction, praying for the removal of the Hiranmaya Patra, the dazzling covering of the Lord. Unless this covering is removed, no one can perceive the real face. Unless this covering is removed so that one can perceive the real face of the personality of Godhead, factual realization of the absolute truth can never be achieved. It's not so simple. It is really deep. And the Lord demands sincerity. And he tests to encourage the devotees to bring out that sincerity. Okay, so now the 7th paragraph, and Srila Prabhupada focuses, at least in the first part of it on the Paramatma, the Paramatma feature, the Purusha avatars. Yeah. So one of these Purusha avatars, Vishnu Tattvas, is Kshirodakshai Vishnu. And he is the Vishnu, Prabhupada explains, among the three popular deities in this world, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. That Vishnu, that's Kshirodakshai Vishnu. But there are two other Vishnus. That Kshirodakshai Vishnu, he is the super soul in everyone's heart and in every atom. But then the second Vishnu Tattva, the second Purusha, is Garbhodakshai Vishnu, who's at the bottom of the universe, and he's the super soul of the universes. Kshirodakshai Vishnu is the super soul of every individual living entity. Garbhodakshai Vishnu, Prabhupada says here, is the collective super soul, not of the individuals, but collectively of all of them. And then beyond the two of them is Karanodakshai Vishnu. He's lying in the causal ocean, and he is the creator of all the universes. So the real yoga system, Prabhupada just mentions the yoga system, but we should understand this is the real yoga system, ultimately means bhakti yoga, devotional service. Teaches serious students to meet these Purusha avatars, to meet them after going beyond the 24 elements, which are analyzed by the followers of Sankhya. And then jnana, the jnanis, those who cultivate empiric knowledge, that jnana helps them realize the Brahma Jyoti, which is the glaring effulgence of the Lord's body. So then Prabhupada quotes Brahma Samhita verse 40, which confirms that the Brahma Jyoti is Krishna's effulgence. I'll just read the translation. In the millions and millions of universes, there are innumerable planets, and each and every one of them is different from the others by its cosmic constitution. Each planet is different from every other planet. All of these planets are situated in a corner of the Brahma Jyoti. This Brahma Jyoti is but the personal rays of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govinda, whom I worship. Yeah, so Prabhupada makes the point that this verse that we just read right now, Brahma Samhita 540, that it's spoken from the platform of factual realization. And this mantra of Isopanisad confirms the process, that confirms the Brahma Samhita verse as a process of realization. So it's a simple prayer to the Lord to remove his Brahma Jyoti effulgence, which there's also here now from Mundaka Upanishad another description. Prabhupada has been focusing in a few of these verses here of this mantra, a few of the paragraphs of the purport, on elaborating what is the Brahma Jyoti. So here, these verses say, in the spiritual realm beyond the material covering, is the unlimited Brahman effulgence, which is free from material contamination. That effulgent white light is understood by transcendentalists to be the light of all lights. In that realm, there's no need of sunshine, moonshine, fire, or electricity for illumination. Indeed, whatever illumination appears in the material world is only a reflection of that supreme illumination. That Brahman is in front and in back, in the north, south, east, and west, and also overhead and below. In other words, that supreme Brahman effulgence spreads throughout both the material and spiritual skies. Okay, so now paragraph 8. And Prabhupada now continuing with this theme of defining, clarifying what is the Brahma Jyoti, what is its position, how should we understand it. Prabhupada says perfect knowledge is to know that Krishna is the source of the Brahma Jyoti. And this we get from Srimad Bhagavatam. So there, Srila Vyasadeva speaks famous verse that the supreme truth can be realized as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan, depending on our realization. Vedanti tat va vidas, tattvam yaj jnanam advayam, brahmeti paramatmeti, Bhagavan iti shabjate. That learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan, depending on their realization. So he never says that the supreme truth is the jiva. And Prabhupada makes the point, if the jiva was supreme, he wouldn't need to pray to the Lord to see his face, as he's doing here. So that idea of the impersonalists and others is foolishness. So the conclusion is then, paragraph 9, that one who has no knowledge of the potencies of the supreme truth will realize him as Brahman. That when one realizes the material potencies of the truth, one will attain Paramatma realization, because Paramatma is just within this world and he's overseeing what goes on with the material potencies. And these are both partial realizations. But when one realizes Krishna fully, after the removal of the effulgence, the Brahma Jyoti, then one realizes Vasudeva Sarvamiti, Krishna's everything. One realizes that he is Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. So then we go on to paragraph 10, paragraph 10. The last paragraph of this purport here. So in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, verses 46 and 47, two famous verses. Prabhupada doesn't give them completely here. Prabhupada says it's a comparative analysis of the three types of transcendentalists. The Jnanis who worship the impersonal Brahman, the yogis who worship super soul, Paramatma, and the devotees, the bhaktas, who worship Lord Krishna. And there, in those two verses, Lord Krishna says very clearly that the devotee is the highest. Let me just read the translations of these two verses. So, 46, a yogi is greater than the ascetic, greater than the empiricist, and greater than the fruitive worker. Therefore, O Arjuna, in all circumstances, be a yogi. And verse 47, which is the last verse of chapter 6, and it's the verse just straight after the one we just read. And of all yogis, the one with great faith, who always abides in me, thinks of me within himself, and renders transcendental loving service to me. He is the most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. That is my opinion. And Prabhupada concludes the paragraph and the whole purport by saying, in summary, a philosopher is better than a laboring man. A mystic is superior to a philosopher. And of all the mystic yogis, he who follows bhakti yoga, constantly engaging in the service of the Lord, is the highest. Sri Isopanisad directs us toward this perfection.